2024 was an eventful year in both finance and rap music. Just a year ago, when people mentioned the Met Gala, we assumed that they were referring to the annual charity fashion event in New York. Just 1 year later, we assumed that they're talking about lunchtime at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, where SBF, Diddy, and Luigi Mangione host one of the most exclusive parties in the world. It's one of the few parties where it's harder to leave than to get in. And who knows who'll be on the guest list next year. 2024 was a year of wars, elections, natural disasters. We saw solar eclipses, bridge collapses, and worried about mysterious drones. Jay-Z realized that he had reached 100 problems this year, and the less that we say about that, the better. 2024 got off to a dramatic start when on New Year's Day, Japan was shaken by a 7.5 magnitude earthquake, which collapsed buildings, caused fires, and triggered tsunami alerts, prompting orders to evacuate coastal areas of Japan. Later that month, we learned that while air travel is the safest form of mass transportation, that's only the case when the airplane's doors have been properly attached. Early in January, an Alaska Airlines flight was forced to make an emergency landing when a door plug fell off of the plane mid-air. Boeing's stock price fell 10% that day as investors worried that the planes had the build quality of a Cybertruck. Fortunately, none of the passengers or crew experienced serious injuries, but one YouTuber did get his fingers stuck in the door of the luggage compartment. Towards the end of January, a Delaware judge ruled against Elon Musk's $56 billion pay package, ruling that the share grant was a controller-conflicted transaction, as Tesla's directors were not independent, did not engage in an arm's-length negotiation, and that the shareholder vote was not fully informed of these conflicts. Following the decision, Musk re-domiciled Tesla in Texas and held a follow-up vote, asking investors to ratify the original options grant. While 70% of Tesla investors voted in Musk's favor, the court rejected this vote, saying that no Delaware court had ever reversed its judgment based on a stockholder vote that took place after a trial. This judgment will likely be appealed to the Delaware Supreme Court next year. 2024 was a big year for elections. 76 countries containing over half of the world's population held elections this year. In February, we saw elections in El Salvador, Pakistan, Finland, and Indonesia. More people voted this year than ever before. Germany's parliament voted in February to decriminalize cannabis, which is not expected to help with the country's long-term decline in productivity. But it is expected to help grow its burgeoning tie-dye t-shirt industry. Everyone was talking about the weight loss drug Ozempic in 2024. Oprah Winfrey announced in February that she was taking the drug and stepped down from the board of Weight Watchers, sending the company's shares into a tailspin. Kate Moss famously said that nothing tastes as good as skinny feels. James Corden, on the other hand, discovered that sausages taste better than Ozempic. He told the press that he tried Ozempic and it didn't work. Now look, I know it's a bit of a mean joke, but it is James Corden, the guy who famously yelled at a waitress so much a few years ago that she needed therapy after serving him. I watched one of his carpool karaoke videos when researching this, and it was so awful that I possibly need therapy too to get over it. He had it coming. The most hyped product of the year, the Apple Vision Pro, was released in February too. It was a bit like Google Glass, which came out 15 years earlier and flopped because people found it weird and creepy. So Apple decided to make something bigger, weirder, creepier, and more ridiculous. Social media was filled with images of people wearing it in public and behaving strangely. It was soon the most returned product in Apple history, and there are now rumors that it's about to be cancelled because, well, look at it. Before we go any further, let me tell you about this week's video sponsor, DeleteMe. DeleteMe is a subscription service that acts on your behalf to force data brokers to delete any of your personal data that they're storing to sell online. Data brokers collect huge amounts of personally identifiable information on individuals that can include social security numbers, birthdays, past and recent addresses, information about your relatives, and much more, which they then sell online to who knows who. Data brokers are legally required to delete any information they store on you if you ask. But unfortunately, there are hundreds of data brokers and they don't make it easy. It could take forever to contact them all. I used DeleteMe to reach out to the hundreds of data brokers on my behalf to request the deletion of my personal data and to deal with any objections. I got a full report back showing where my data was removed from. With a yearly subscription, DeleteMe tracks to make sure that your data is not re-added to their lists. Get 20% off DeleteMe US and UK consumer plans when you go to joindeleteme.com/Boyle and use promo code Boyle at checkout. In March, Donald Trump, who, spoiler alert, we'll hear more about later in this video, won a Supreme Court decision overturning a Colorado ruling that he was not eligible to run for president. The next day, Nikki Haley dropped out of the race, ceding the Republican nomination to Trump. After suppressing and murdering opponents, as is tradition in Russia, Vladimir Putin won 87.8% of the Russian vote, the highest ever result in Russia's post-Soviet history. Now, say what you will about the guy, he is popular. Not as popular as Kim Jong-un, but still quite popular. A cargo ship hit a bridge in Maryland in March, causing the entire 1.6-mile-long structure to collapse. Between this and the ship that blocked the Suez Canal a few years ago, these ships are getting completely out of control and something needs to be done about them. Sam Bankman-Fried was sentenced to 25 years in prison in March after being convicted of fraud, conspiracy, and money laundering. With SBF out of the picture, politicians worried about who would fund their election campaigns. Later in the year, we learned that it would be other crypto guys who haven't been sent to prison yet. Tech layoffs were a big news story in March. 130,000 tech workers lost their jobs across 457 different companies this year. The viral video app TikTok was ordered to be sold by its Chinese parent company or be banned, and Donald Trump IPO'd his version of Twitter, Truth Social, on the same day that he announced the release of his Trump-branded Bibles. Bibles were not the only presidential merch this year. Gold trainers and watches were released a few months later. In April, South Korea's opposition party won a landslide majority in the country's general election. This was a defeat for the sitting president, whose decline in popularity was blamed on a bag of spring onions. He made the oldest political mistake in the book by visiting a supermarket and saying that a bundle of spring onions were reasonably priced. Usually, politicians are tricked into making mistakes like this. A journalist will ask them how much a loaf of bread or a bottle of milk costs. They'll give the wrong price and be shown to be completely out of touch. This was the first time in political history that a politician set the very trap that they fell into. The same month, Donald Trump stood trial on criminal charges in a hush money case in New York, and NASA engineers managed to successfully repair and recode Voyager 1 from 15 billion miles away after a 5-month gap in not receiving data. Amazon's retail stores that claimed to use technology which allowed customers to just grab items from a store shelf and walk out without the need for checkouts was revealed to be just Indian workers watching CCTV footage, a reminder that AI isn't always what it seems. And do try to remember that when using one of those AI image generators, as you might be making a badly paid worker's day really tough when you ask for a particularly bizarre image. In May, President Biden announced that he was quadrupling U.S. tariffs on Chinese EVs from 25% to 100% to encourage Americans who were already not buying Chinese EVs to continue not buying them. And so far, that strategy appears to be working. In rap news, Kendrick Lamar's diss track, Not Like Us became his fourth number one. Now, while I haven't gotten around to listening to it yet, it is one of my goals for 2025, unless something else comes up to distract me, but I'll see what I can do. In May, the Dow Jones Index hit 40,000 points for the first time ever, and Rishi Sunak announced a UK general election while getting soaked in a rainstorm. In June, people suddenly got excited about meme stocks once again as Keith Gill tweeted an image of a chair which signaled to GameStop investors that the short squeeze they'd been waiting for years was about to arrive. After a bizarre YouTube livestream where he appeared to be dressed as Axl Rose covered in bandages, the stock price began to decline. It is still up 85% year to date, and people on Reddit still say that it's a great company. I'm starting to think that every one of my year-end videos going forward will have to contain an update on the price of GameStop stock, along with maybe the Tesla to Dogecoin ratio. In 20 years' time, people will have forgotten what these things are, but it'll just be a New Year's tradition, like singing Auld Lang Syne. No one knows what it's about, it's just a thing that people do. Towards the end of June, we saw the Trump-Biden debate where President Joe Biden spoke incoherently and appeared to repeatedly lose his train of thought. Viewers worried as they watched two men that you wouldn't trust with the remote control fight over who would lead the most powerful democracy in the world. In July, British voters turfed out the Conservatives after 14 years in power and 5 prime ministers. I've forgotten the name of the guy who won, but it was the other guy, the one who didn't get rained on back in May. 2024 was, it turns out, a year in which incumbent parties lost their majorities and either gave up power or held on through cobbled-together coalitions. A lot of this was driven by voter frustration over inflation. Later in July, Donald Trump survived an assassination attempt while speaking at an open-air rally in Pennsylvania. He was shot and wounded in the right ear, and for a short while, Trump supporters wore ear bandages to signal their allegiance. Democratic voters spent a few weeks worrying that they would accidentally injure their ears and have to wear a bandage and be shunned by their friends and families. Joe Biden dropped out of the presidential race in July, quickly endorsing Kamala Harris and encouraging his party to unite behind her. August started out with a big market sell-off driven by the unwind of the yen carry trade. RFK Jr. admitted to dumping a dead bear in Central Park, which he had found on the roadside and put in the trunk of his car before meeting friends for dinner. Apparently, this solved a decade-old mystery that had confused the NYPD. The bear story wasn't even RFK Jr.'s strangest animal story to come out over his election campaign. There was the whale story and the dog-eating story, too. If these are the stories that he casually tells people, you have to wonder what kind of things he's keeping secret. He announced that doctors had found a dead worm in his brain, too. And brain worms are, I suppose, one of the reasons that we don't typically eat roadkill or other street meat. Later in the month, RFK Jr. ended his candidacy for president and endorsed Donald Trump. Harley-Davidson announced in August that they were ending their woke initiatives after coming under pressure from a ponytailed activist called Robbie Starbuck. I hadn't been aware of Harley-Davidson's woke policies, but I went to their website and sure enough, they've 3 different electric motorbikes for sale. Now, I'm not sure if you have to ride these things on the sidewalk or if they're allowed on the street, but this makes no sense for Harley-Davidson whatsoever. I think their entire strategy is to sell their motorbikes at cost price, and then all of the profits come from selling loud exhaust pipes as an upgrade. How can they make money with electric bikes? The Olympics were big news in August too, as a new sporting star appeared on the scene. Raygun, who many say is the Razzle Khan of breakdancing. In September, the Federal Reserve cut interest rates by 50 basis points. This was the first rate cut in 4 years. Usually, a 50 basis point cut is seen as a sign that the economy is either in bad shape or that the central bank knows that it's cutting too late. Powell, however, convinced investors that this was a luxury decision, that the Fed was cutting rates because it could. The same month, pharma bro Martin Shkreli was ordered by a federal judge to turn over all copies of the Wu-Tang Clan's unreleased rap album, Once Upon a Time in Shaolin. It was something to do with crypto and was too boring for me to read the full article about, but it did happen, and now you know about it. Towards the end of the month, a series of videos began to spread on TikTok in which finfluencers claimed that you could withdraw large sums of money from ATM machines by depositing checks for money that you don't actually have and then withdrawing a portion of those sums before the bank realized. They called this the infinite money glitch, but federal prosecutors later renamed it check fraud. There was a second assassination attempt against Donald Trump in September. The assassin hid in the bushes at a golf course wearing a pink t-shirt. He was by no means a master of disguise. You have to be impressed by Trump's street smarts, as after this event he was rarely seen on stage without RFK Jr. being present, figuring that it made sense to have a Kennedy on stage to draw the sniper fire. In October, we saw the Trump-Harris debate in which the two candidates took a break from their part-time jobs at McDonald's to discuss all of the big issues facing America.
They're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there.
After the debate, the media discussed whether immigrants were actually eating the dogs and cats in Springfield. It turned out to have mostly been RFK Jr., who's not an immigrant, and he claims that it was a goat, not a dog. In November, Sean Puff Daddy, P. Diddy, Sean John Diddy Combs was arrested on charges of behaving like the Tate brothers and possession of enough baby oil to fill a swimming pool. His punishment was to be locked up with Sam Bankman-Fried, who's alleged to have stopped showering more than 3 years ago. Caroline Ellison, the fraudster and star witness at the FTX case, was sentenced to 2 years in prison this November. This is far from the woods where she and her kind call home, so it should be quite hard for her. Internet forum moderator Elon Musk came out in support of Donald Trump in the lead up to the US elections, spending over $250 million on the election. When Trump won in November, Musk was rewarded with a government job. Later that month, we learned that Mark Zuckerberg, who in 2024 surprised the world by dressing as a human, had collaborated with auto-tune rapper T-Pain to release a ghastly cover version of the song Get Low. I'd strongly advise against listening to it. I tried to describe it to you, but as a defensive mechanism to preserve my sanity, my brain has wiped it entirely from my memory. The biggest news event of the year came in November, when crypto rapper Razzle Khan was sentenced to 18 months in prison over a 2016 Bitcoin hack. This is, of course, a huge loss to the crypto rap community. Razzle Khan reappeared on X, the Everything app, last month, announcing that she would be selling video messages on Cameo before she reports to prison in the new year. This video is being recorded before Christmas, and I won't lie, the one present I'm hoping for is a personalized Razzle Khan rap, which I would never sell to Martin Shkreli, no matter how much he offers to pay. I've been dropping hints to my family all month. Over a span of 8 days, Matt Gaetz, a man who would make Prince Andrew sweat, went from being re-elected to becoming an Attorney General pick to ultimately bowing out before a Senate confirmation hearing. Who knows what shenanigans he'll get up to next year. In December, the Hawk Tuah girl, who probably also has an actual name, but who's going to remember that, became one of the biggest podcasters in the world, pretty much overnight after a viral street interview she did on TikTok. She managed to compress the rise and fall of a modern-day influencer into just a few months. Viral moment, podcast, hang out with Logan Paul, crypto scam, and then get cancelled. She launched a celebrity meme coin, which is a crypto token that people claim is funny, to paper over the fact that it's just a scam. According to news reports, some Hawk Tuah coin investors lost as much as $70,000 on their ill-fated investment. Now, I can't help but feel that if you lost money on the Huktua coin, you should probably consider putting any of your remaining savings in a trust overseen by Britney Spears' father, as otherwise things just aren't going to work out for you. Other big news in December was the online reappearance of Enron. We learned from meme stocks a few years ago that stock prices can rise due to bankruptcy, so it makes good financial sense to resuscitate one of the most famous names in corporate fraud. It is 2024 after all. In personal news, I started a new hobby this December when I bought a small fleet of drones, which I'm having a lot of fun with, but I do wish I could fly them without it constantly becoming headline news. The stock that everyone was talking about in 2024 was Nvidia, which almost tripled in value this year. The best performing developed economy of the year based on GDP growth, inflation, employment, and the performance of its stock market was Spain, where both the economy and the pace of job creation are growing faster than the United States, whose economy has been the envy of the world. The British economy, on the other hand, struggled in 2024 with no growth in living standards, and data showed that households were dipping into their savings to get by. A Lloyd's survey showed that confidence amongst British businesses had fallen to its lowest level of the year this December. The US continued to boom in 2024, having grown at 3 times the pace of the rest of the G7 so far this decade. As of today, the US is at the forefront of AI, biotechnology, advanced materials, pharmaceuticals, software, and finance. The US stock market is up more than 27% year to date, with only a few days left in the year. In recent decades, China appeared to be catching up with the United States, and people wondered if China's autocratic model worked better for economic growth than the sometimes chaotic US democratic model. China's nominal GDP has fallen from about 3/4 of the size of America at its peak in 2021 to 2/3 today. Let me finish up by thanking you guys for watching my videos this year. I've really enjoyed making them, and I hope that you had a great 2024 and that 2025 is even better. If you enjoyed this video, you should watch my video on Neom the Line next. Don't forget to check out our sponsor, DeleteMe, using the link in the description, and see you in the next video. Bye.